All right, for now, we're gonna, for our next session, we're gonna zoom out a little bit. So there's obviously a ton of value in talking about the tactical, being in the trenches, getting it done, right? But we also have to think about, what our executive committees are thinking, what our boards are thinking, right? And then how that trickles down into what matters for CIOs and IT leaders and how they're presenting. So I'm really excited to welcome two friends up to the stage that are experts in this area. First, we have a CIO Hall of Famer. He's been on boards for the better part of 2 decades now, I want to say both public and private. This is Wayne Shurts, and also the CIO of 7 Brew Coffee, which is the fastest growing restaurant chain in America, or in the world, in America.
Yeah.
Yes, which is impressive all in its own right. Longtime IT leader, and who's just starting her board journey actually now, and that's Danyel Bischof-Forsyth. So thank you both for being here.
Thank you.
So for everybody in the audience, if you want to think about some questions that you might have about the topic, we'll do a quick Q&A towards the end. But in the meantime, let's just jump in. I think first and foremost, it's always good to kind of set the stage a little bit and talk about your own journeys. How did you get to where you are, right? From both being IT executives at different companies and different industries and what have you. But Wayne, maybe if you could take us through just quickly, maybe like the big picture on how you got to where you are today.
Sure. I spent the first 20 years of my career at Nabisco. Wasn't in IT at the beginning, ended up there, but was in all sorts of different functions. I went over to Cadbury, became the CIO at Cadbury. That was after Kraft bought Nabisco, and then I went to Cadbury, became the CIO of Cadbury, and then Kraft bought Cadbury. So they were following me around. Then I went to SuperValu, Cisco Foods, and I was the sitting CIO at Cisco Foods in 2015. I guess the process started in 2014. Got recruited to be on the Conway, was a trucking company board. There was about almost a year process to get on the board. I was on the board for 10 months because we were acquired by XPO Logistics. So I always tell people I added great value really quick.
Took longer for you to get there than you actually was there.
And then retired from Cisco in 2019 and now serve on 1 public company board and 3 private boards.
Excellent, excellent. Danyel, what about you?
Similar journey. I'm just a little behind in the process, I would say. So I had 28 years at Hallmark Cards, all in tech, and then I moved my family to Northwest Arkansas, so Bentonville, for Tyson Foods. I was there a handful of years left there as CTO, and most recently this year joined 7 Brew Coffee as their CIO. And along that journey, I had served on a handful of nonprofit boards, so I got my feet wet with governance, and then joined a few advisory boards in for tech companies, because that was my specialty, I guess. And then most recently joined a board for Net Zero, a private company. Very
cool. Well, good luck with that. There's a lot more to the journey, you're right.
Thank you.
So just thinking, we just thought it'd be interesting for to hear from 2 seasoned leaders from the C-suite who are now sitting on boards and being able to see kind of both sides of the table, right? I always find it interesting to talk to any executive who now sits on a board just to see kind of how have things changed, how have your perspectives changed. But for all of you too, to really be kind of dialing in and really thinking about, what is my board looking, what are they looking for? What are they asking about? What are they curious about? For the time that you have to get up there and present, I think it should help you to have a clearer lens on that. So let me ask, from your newer experience, but still, what's your board talking about when it comes to technology issues? What are the big things that you're hearing about now? And then maybe we could also get into what we think is going to be a big part of the agenda going forward.
Yeah, so in my experience so far, it's really focused on a little more externally than internally. So looking at external opportunities, so where can we look at emerging tech, where can we look at positioning the company from a capability standpoint, and making sure we're looking strategically at where we're positioned. Still a topic, every single board meeting is still cyber and still risk. And
right.
I don't think that's ever gonna go away. but that's something that seems to be a regular topic. Again, looking more externally at the threats and opportunities.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, I think cyber's a given, right? I remember looking at some of the surveys that they do of board members for PwC and E&Y. A few of them do these annual studies just to see what are the big topics, what are the big priorities that boards have. And I remember, maybe 10 years ago, maybe one of them was tech related. Now, 3 of the top 5 are tech related. So it didn't take very long for that to happen, but we all know what's happened in that time. So we've heard, Wayne, today we're hearing about data, we're hearing about DevOps. Heard a few mentions of AI. I thought we'd hear more, to be honest. Obviously cyber. But what are you hearing? I mean, those are some things that go into the bucket, I think, for everybody, but what are the big ones that you're hearing?
Cyber, definitely, of course. Yeah. Everybody's trying to figure out AI. What are the opportunities? How is it going to change our business model? Where can we apply it, both from a productivity standpoint as well as a revenue generation standpoint? I think one thing we've been talking about it kind of as a technology community for decades now, but I think it's really starting to gain some steam in the boardrooms of how can we use technology to change our business models and innovate and really develop new revenue streams. One of the things that we do on my boards is talk about, hey, if maybe we should get a little skunk group, and some have done it, of 3 or 4 of our best people, and ask them to go off and pretend that they're a technology startup. How would they come disrupt our industry and disrupt our company?
Yeah.
So I think a lot more of that is happening. I think AI will drive some of that. But yeah, it's the typical cyber, AI, new revenue opportunity.
It seems like those are the conversations that I have with CIOs, with other IT leaders. It's those, the conversation, either whichever way you want to look at it, evolves into that or it devolves into those. But data is a big part of that too, right? I mean, it's something that we were talking about today, and something that seems to be, obviously a huge underpinning of AI. So a lot of the time when the boards are, the non-tech members of the board are sitting there sort of clamoring for AI, it gave the CIOs an opportunity and CTOs an opportunity to say, we need to get our data in order before we're able to, move the needle there, right? Is that a realization is the light bulb gone off fully?
I think it's the next iteration of garbage in, garbage out.
Yeah.
It's bad data to your AI, you get useless results out, and I think boards get that,
Yeah. So thinking about for folks in the audience and kind of getting prepared for these types of scenarios, how often do the CIOs at your companies present to the board? Or maybe you can even reflect on your own experience of, but today, like more recently, how often is the CIO from your presenting to you as a board member?
Yeah, so we have technology as a topic at every single board meeting. Even if it's just participating in some discussions that are planned or formally presenting, it is nearly every single board meeting.
That's great.
Is a topic.
That's what we want to see, right? Yeah, Wayne, how about you?
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's probably every single board meeting. It's twice a year on cyber is just kind of in the schedule and always there.
Yeah.
But they'll be there, they're there now on AI. At my public board, we have like a chief digital officer who's there really driving our new business model stuff around technology. That's every meeting.
Yeah.
When we do the once a year strategy session, a lot of technology. So it's practically every meeting. If we're doing an ERP or some big implementation, they'll be there.
That's great. It's the National Association of Corporate Directors, if anybody's interested in joining a board, they're a great resource. I think it's nacd.org. They have all kinds of certifications and what have you, and also just a lot of informative material. But they also do a lot of studies, and they found recently that about 2/3 of public company boards discuss IT at every meeting, which stands to reason that the CIO is there, right, presenting for at least some period of time. But private companies, 1/3 of the private companies that are out there say they don't have the tech expertise necessary to really effectively oversee what's going on there. And you've been on some private company boards, and what's the difference there?
Yeah, well, there's 2 differences. There's certainly almost a size and scale thing that makes it easier for the public companies to be investing and talking about technology. There's also kind of a risk management, compliance thing that makes the public companies talk about it more.
Yep.
The private companies do talk about it. I think they're digging in. They understand the difference. They're trying to make they are making strides, and I see technology becoming a much bigger topic on these private company boards. Yeah, it's probably not at every meeting yet, but it's forefront of the mind at every meeting, yeah.
Yeah, so everybody who works for a private company, I think the same is probably reflective of nonprofit companies starting to get a lot smarter about it. So, it's rising in interest for sure. Going back to the CIOs presenting, as board members, what are you looking for from them? What do you want them to be telling you? And what do you want them to be telling the rest of the board? You obviously are the resident technology experts that are on your board, but not everybody knows what you know, right? It's usually the polar opposite, right? That they have very little knowledge or very little understanding maybe of current technologies at least. So what do you want your CIOs to be telling your board when they come in?
Yeah, and I think I probably learned this being on the other side for a minute, because when I was presenting as the CIO, I probably focused a little too much on the operational, some on strategy clearly, but really what the board wants to hear is they know you're competent, they know you're the right person for the role, they know you've got the day-to-day down. It's really making sure that you're aligned with the business strategy of where the company's heading.
Right.
It's that you understand the landscape, especially the competitive landscape and the industry. You understand emerging tech and where those are going and how the company can leverage that. And then, like Wayne said, really understanding where threats could come, especially in surprise the organization. And those could come from a number of places. And, being aware and being able to scan the environment looking for those as well.
Okay. Makes sense. And I love the emerging tech. The emerging tech piece has come up a bunch of times today. And I feel like that's something that either gets cobbled into a bunch of other things, but I like the way that we are kind of carving it out in its own right, in an important way. So, but let's stay with it. What what are you looking for?
Yeah, I'll probably answer it less from what I'm looking for and more what I know my other fellow board members who might not be as tech literate are.
Right.
First of all, is a business approach and mindset. Is this person as much as a business person as every other person in that C-suite? Or do they know our market? Do they know our business? Do they know how we make money? Do they know what we need to do? That's really important. And then strategy versus tactics. And I'm not necessarily talking about the IT strategy that you have, but how does the IT strategy support the overall business strategy? And how does it enable, and do you understand that, and are we deploying technology that helps our overall strategy? I think another thing that people are looking for is just the kind of cross-functional dynamics and interaction. Does the CIO seem to have the support and get along and almost be able to finish the sentences of the other members of the C-suite, which means they're pretty integrated, or are they off kind of on an island? And
right.
You can understand why they think about that.
Yeah.
Transparency, I think, especially when it comes to issues like cyber, and I've made this mistake, and I've seen others make it, is you go in and you tell the board, we got it all under control, everything's fine. Well, every board member knows that you can never have cyber all under control. And you kind of lose credibility when you say that. And it's good to be transparent and say, this is our program, this is what I feel good about, this is what keeps me awake at night, and this is what we're doing about it. I think you gain credibility from sharing that with the board. And innovation, we talk about emerging tech.
Yep.
Is the CIO driving some of the innovation themselves? Are they being driven by others in the C-suite? Are they partnering with others on the innovation? What are they doing around, I heard in the last session, you were talking about labs. Are they doing things in labs and really getting out there?
Yeah.
And you talk about, how tech companies may be able to disrupt your market or your business. That often starts with emerging tech and Silicon Valley mindset, and how well are you tied into that and thinking about that and connected to that?
Right. Yeah. Just a curious show of hands, because we are talking about emerging tech, and it's an interesting tangent just for a moment here. But how many of you have done the sort of curated trips to Silicon Valley or to Boston or to somewhere else that's sort of a startup hotbed? And maybe it's not you personally, but maybe your organization. Are you familiar with this? Is this something that sounds familiar that anybody's done? Anyone? Okay. Because if you can do it, right?
Oh, it's great.
I know, yeah. You and I have talked about it from your time at Cisco, and being able to have the access that we all have basically to get to venture capital firms and consulting firms that can kind of curate those. Is always
little quick story on that, if you will.
Sure.
So I was early on at Cisco. I was taking us from kind of the transformation from being a waterfall kind of IT organization to a DevOps and much more agile approach to doing things. And I kept talking about that to folks in the C-suite, and I must not have been a very good communicator, because I could tell by the looks on their faces they had no idea what I was talking about.
Like another language, right? Yeah.
I convinced our CEO, and we took the C-suite out for a day and a half to Silicon Valley and went around to different companies and just heard them talk. I knew we had a winner when, like, the first company we were at, where they were going, "That's that agile thing that Wayne keeps talking about." And all the light bulbs came on, and we made tremendous progress.
Yeah,
after that.
right. You got to bring it to life, right? I remember our friend John Marcante, formerly of Vanguard. He would bring board members out.
Yeah.
It would be it was a mission for him to really get it across that, he felt like he maybe got the C-suite, but then said, I can't get anything done unless the board really buys in. So he brought board members out with him to do this, and they looked at everything across the board and made a huge difference. But Danyel.
And I'll add a little bit to that. So we also did trips where, if it was a trip of multiple executive briefing centers in one trip, and what would happen is the dynamic, it was every time I could predict it, we'd go to the first place and they'd start sharing their technology roadmap and the strategy and think out there 3 or 4 or 5 years. And everybody would be thinking, that's way out there. And then you go to the second briefing center and you start to see some of the same nuggets of tech and some of the similar ideas and use cases. And then all of a sudden you're thinking, how can that apply to us? And then by the third and fourth visit, it's, why aren't we doing it already, Danyel? And so, that was always really good to just bring everybody along and hear about the emerging tech and how it can play as a competitive advantage for our company.
Yeah, absolutely. So thinking about, I think we actually, one of the questions I was going to say is what are the most effective things that CIOs and IT leaders, I think you already kind of answered that part in terms of, what are you looking for, right? What's going to be good for them to see? And everybody, we'll have Q&A in a minute. So if anybody's got some thoughts, I'd love to see it. Might have to have you shout out a little bit because it is kind of bright out here and we can't see all that clearly. But what are the mistakes that CIOs make when they, and I'll ask this from I'll ask you to be candid in that you may have made these mistakes and learned them later just from having been on a board, right? And seeing it or just getting through some of the experiences. But essentially I was asking, what are you expecting from a board? What do you expect, or what are you expecting from a CIO? But as a board member, what are the things that they do maybe sometimes or maybe often that are just not helpful and maybe even hurting their case for something? Do you want to start, Danyel?
Mistakes. Yeah, there's probably several. In that space, I think one of the best advice I received when I was presenting to my first board was this idea of really understanding the board members. As a matter of fact, my mentor gave me a packet that pretty much outlined the bios and then what was top of mind for them. And so that was incredibly helpful for me. And that started a practice of really prepare. I think that's incredibly important. Try to anticipate some things. And then that evolved into, and this is where I saw it from the CTO, CIO side, and then now on the board side, is this idea of being coachable. Mm-hmm. And when I was on the CIO, CTO side, I thought, these questions that I'm being asked or these challenges were more of a, questioning the direction I'm heading or even my alignment with business partners and where we're heading together. But in fact, what the job of the board member is to coach and to ask the questions to make sure that we've thought through and anticipated things. And it could be in other industries that we're not even in, but they have experience with and that they have seen, or they have a different purview. Right. And so I really, big mistake just probably from a mindset standpoint was, going in and more defending the direction we were heading as opposed to really seeking out these ideas that may not seem to be completely aligned with our company and industry, but in a lot of ways they were, because they had different experiences coming in and different ways of thinking about the strategy of the organization or how we're leveraging technology in different ways, and really being open. And now, again, as a board member, it's the whole idea is our job is to coach and to make sure we thought through those things. Right. And so I think for me, it was the mindset was the big mistake. at first.
Well, you bring up sort of 2 points that are connected that I think are really interesting. One, I think a lot of the mistake that CIOs make is not trying to, I mean, at the very least, learn who the board members are, what their backgrounds are, let alone try to build a relationship with them, right? I mean, that's a whole other level. You got to graduate up to that part of it. But the idea of just, understanding that they're not, nose in, fingers out, right? Is the expression, if anybody's familiar with, when you're on a board, you're not actually running a company. You're keeping tabs on it, you're keeping the pulse, and you're guiding, right? Your job is to guide and to coach and to direct in a way that but sometimes that comes through in different ways, where they're finding sort of teachable moments by asking questions. And a lot of the time there can be a defense, there can be a wall that you put up because maybe they're not the greatest communicators, or maybe sometimes it comes out in the wrong tone, but they're looking for ways to kind of channel their past experience and seeing where different business strategies have played in, let alone, we don't know how the technology fits in, but this is something you need to think about and then make the technology work for it, right? So those are great points, and I've actually had a lot of fun lately helping certain CIOs that I know with how do you kind of build those relationships and anticipate what people want when they don't really tell you. And that's a kind of a Jedi skill for a lot of board members, but or for a lot of CIOs. But Wayne, what do you think about sort of the bad side of the coin? What are the things that they do wrong?
I can guarantee you, I've done every one of these things I've mentioned,
I had a feeling
and I've seen them done too. And the first one's going to sound obvious, and we hear it all the time, but you really need to check yourself on it, because I see it happen over and over again, even with very senior level CIOs, and I think it's just the world we live in. You got to avoid the jargon and the acronyms because we are laden with them. You go to a board, you might think they know what all that means. They don't, and you're going to be talking to yourself, and you don't do yourself any favors. So you really want to look at your board decks and what you're doing and get all of the ITEs out of it and just plain speak and talk to the board straight up. You will make a lot of friends, and you'll have board members come up to you and say, finally, I understood what our CIO was talking about, or I understood this issue that I always heard about, but I never understood it before. So it's kind of an obvious point, but I can't emphasize it enough. I mentioned one already. Don't pretend that you have your cyber all under control and everything's fine. You're going to lose credibility the minute you do that. It is absolutely fine to share with your board, we're struggling with this, we're vulnerable here, and you'll get a lot of points for doing that. Just say we're vulnerable here, but this is what we're doing about it.
Right.
Make sure you include that. Another thing, don't get ahead of your CEO. Like, the board, you should not say something to the board that you have not said and your CEO hasn't heard. You say it before and you've had that conversation. Because I've gotten myself in trouble with that. I've seen others that have done that. And just, so those are some of the mistakes. I just want to emphasize, kind of what Danyel said is, you're not going to be able to have a close personal relationship with every member of your board. There are too many. But I would find one, maybe two, that you can get that kind of has an affinity for technology, that you can get to know, that you can kind of correspond with off-board cycle, get your CEO's permission to do that. And that'll be really helpful, not only to what they're thinking, but they will help you around that boardroom too with what others thinking and maybe how to make your points. Yep. So I think that's a really good idea.
Yeah, and I'll add to that. I was extremely fortunate at Tyson. They established a mentor on the board with each executive.
That's great.
It was my saving grace. I leveraged that relationship to understand the conversations that were happening when I wasn't in the room, to understand the temperature on certain topics. I would run different things by him, even board decks when I was presenting, just for feedback to see if there's anything that I was missing. Again, they're in conversations that we're not in,
right? And
so that was invaluable. And then I knew I had an ally in the room.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Oh, that's such a phenomenal resource. I haven't heard enough companies doing that. That's a new one from my toolkit that I'm taking away.
And
that's
I'm just thinking about the boards I'm on. I am the CIO's mentor on each one of those, and kind of do all.
Great.
Yeah, I mean that's one of the challenges of being the technology expert that they bring on, right? Let's hear some questions. We got a few minutes left. Anybody have any questions for us? We got one in the back over here. Oh, there we go. Thanks for the lights.
Hey guys, thank you for the time. I guess from just a two-part question, one from the view of the CIO and the second one from the view of the board. When we talk about building versus buying, the dilemma for CIOs of buying enterprise software, what goes into that and what's like the biggest factors? And does it affect the board or does that even make it to the board's point of view?
Interesting.
Yeah. I'll answer
Go
from
ahead.
the CIO side, and since Wayne is on multiple boards, if that's okay. So from my approach to that is, I like frameworks a lot, and so I think when I look at build versus buy, having a framework that says, with the organizations that I have been a part of, it's pretty easy to say if it's a competitive advantage or something that would give it speed to market or there's something not already available, then I lean more towards the build. If it's something that's readily available, not competitive advantage, the TCO is better and integrates well with our tech stack, I go build all day. And so I'd be very, very clear about the when, I go buy all day, my apologies. So I'm very, very choiceful in how we invest the tech team on a build, to make sure that it meets that criteria of competitive advantage, speed to market, something special about that.
Yeah, almost identical answer is, for those things that are not a competitive advantage, maybe your finance system, your HR system, whatever it may be, go buy. And for those things, though, if you really know your industry and your business, where you're going to get competitive advantage, could be your e-commerce, whatever it is, build if you can because you can move faster. When it's competitive advantage, you don't want to wait around for your software vendor to give the next function, the next feature on the next release that may be important to your customers. You want to be able to do that now. So that's kind of the way we look at it. That's the way our board looks at it.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. Other question in the back there?
We have one last one in the back in the middle.
Sorry? No, go ahead.
That's me.
Great.
I'm a CISO. I've been a CISO for 12 years in retail and in the financial industry. And I was just wondering, we'd heard a lot of talk about the SEC and some of these regulatory bodies requiring cyber expertise, but it feels like they're going more towards CIOs and not CISOs. Do you see that changing anytime soon? Because I'd love to get on a board at some point.
Could you repeat that?
Do it.
I didn't hear it that well.
Can you repeat the second part?
I was just saying, do you see that trend changing where more boards are going to be looking for that cyber expertise in the future instead of relying on CIOs or CTOs?
I mean, my only response to that would be, especially if you're a CIO or a CTO that's had the cyber or information security report to you and you bring that, it's almost a 2-for-1 to fulfill that requirement on the board by going with the CIO or CTO. If they don't have that, then I'm certain they would need to have somebody, on the board that would be, have deep cyber experience as well. So I'm not sure about, you're more steeped in the trends of where that's heading.
It's a tricky one right now.
It
I think
is.
it's hard to say. I think that it's going to be I think for anything, it's going to be the more well-rounded executive, right? I think we've said that for a while, that a CIO or a CISO is not getting on the board just because they're a CIO or a CISO. They've got to have more, meat, more a stronger, more rounded kind of resume and capabilities. When it comes to the SEC specifically and what they're looking for, I think you'd be hard pressed to not be able to find a CIO who knows what all those mean. The right reporting, the right kind of details that need to be disclosed. If they're doing their job, they know what that is, right?
Yeah. The boards that I'm on, the public board that I'm on, we obviously had this discussion when the SEC came out with the last things that they came out with about whether we have a specialist on the board, like a CISO to oversee this, or whether it's a board responsibility. There was pros and cons of both. There's the pro of having someone who's deeply technical around cyber that could really help the board out. The con on that was you don't want the rest of the board doing this and saying, I have no involvement because Danyel's taking care of that. It's all Danyel. So it was how to get that expertise on your board, but not have it, but still have it be a full board responsibility, because it is a full board responsibility, and cyber can start here and suddenly be this big. So
it's such a good point, because we've been fighting this battle for so long to educate and to get the board, to get the non-technical board members engaged in the technology itself. Cyber's even tougher. So, but it matters more, right? It matters more. So we don't want to actually push them away from it. So, excellent points. I think there was one other question over here. Sorry, over here. And I think this will be the last question for now.
Yes, sir. I just had an interest in your relationships as a CIO and laying out your strategy. How does the CFO play in that partnership?
How does a CFO play into the CIO laying out their strategy?
Yes.
I could think of a lot of negative ways to answer that question, but I'll toss it over to you, and then I'll give some thoughts.
Oh, I think the CFO-CIO relationship is one of the most important.
yeah,
Right.
it is.
I mean, straight up, once I join an executive team, I mean, that's one of the first relationships to build, to make sure, because, I mean, technology takes investment. Those investments are valuable resources that the company could spend a number of ways, and making sure that you're aligned with the CFO on what you're looking at from a benefit, a return, a value perspective is very, very important. You know, I think personally, those relationships that I've had with the CFO, you know, making sure we have, and again, I'll say a framework or a clear understanding of what needs to be put in place, and, you know, how you show back value is absolutely critical to getting things sold in and approved, and having your CFO right beside you all along the way. So while you're very, just like Wayne had said, you're very, very tight with your business leaders, you're going together with strategies and asks from a capability standpoint, you have to make sure the CFO is on the same page.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll echo that. CIO-CFO relationship, incredibly important. Yeah, it's one of the strongest partnerships that you need to have. In my first CIO role, I reported to a CFO. My last two, I reported to the CEO. Sometimes it depends. Sometimes your CFO, and that was years ago, could have what you don't want is your CFO who views IT as a cost center. And the only thing that I could say, that if that's the case, and I think that's becoming less and less and less the case, because you're getting CFOs that are well-rounded business people, and they see how technology is reshaping everything. But if that is your case, it's kind of your job to help open their eyes and help figure out a way for them to see that it's beyond a cost center, and what technology can do for business productivity, revenue generation, and it is an investment and not a cost center. But unfortunately, that falls on you.
Yeah, and that's what I was pointing at when I was sort of hinting that there's a negative here, and that is that you'll have sort of an old school CFO who will view it as a cost center. And again, when we talk about how a lot of non-technical board members don't really understand the tech, if you have a CFO who does not understand it and is scared of it, then a lot of the time they're not going to be a partner. So I think it's also incumbent on the CIO to be a good partner for the CFO, right? And to understand that there may be a deficit in terms of understanding or in terms of interest, and being able to advocate the right way, to educate the right way, and to push for the right things with the understanding that there is a budget. There are financial limitations. So thank you for the questions. That was excellent. Really, really helpful. And then I think just real quick before we move on, is there we'll call this a lightning round, one important piece of advice that you'd give to CIOs for maybe the next time that they present to their board? Kind of thinking about everything we've talked about. What are the things, as board member, what are the things that you want to see? So what would you tell them that their boards definitely want to hear next time? What would you say? Because Wayne, you want to start?
I think I kind of hit them. Do the plain speak, make sure you got it.
Yep.
Be transparent. Don't be afraid to talk about what you're struggling with, what the vulnerabilities are, where you need help or support. Board members are there to help, and they want to add value. And when you do something like that, they're looking for ways that they can help you and add value. And I'll hit again on try to get that board member that you're close to, that can look at your board deck before you give it, that can tell you how others are reacting to things, that can coach you on how to get points across to your board. Definitely be talking about innovation and new business opportunities.
Absolutely. Danyel, last word?
Yeah, I would say keep the operational updates to the pre-read and make sure that the discussion is strategic.
Absolutely. Great. Absolutely. Hey, great conversation, great lessons. I think everybody can learn a little bit, and I think as we continue to go along, these conversations are going to be even more valuable because the board's going to care even more and more and more as we get further down the road. So everybody please help me in thanking Danyel and Wayne. Thank you.